sun to go down so we can show you slides. We'll get started. First thing on the list is our chicken dinner coming up on June 8th. We're going to have it at a different spot. It's going to be over at Lakeview Lodge. So, chicken dinner is the usual famous stuffed chicken breast with everybody likes. Can't wait. Okay, probably you noticed we have cookbooks for sale out here. And this is a fundraiser we're having for 1 month. And they're on sale tonight. They'll be on sale June 8th. And that's it. So take a look at them. They're very nice books. And might help some menus there. They're $10. And that includes tax and so forth. Membership renewals out front. And we're also working on an open house June 10th and 17th from about 11 to 3 o'clock. We'll have a lot of Alice's stuff there at that time, plus some other items. And one last item. We have a quilt over here, the Women's Auxiliary from the fire department. Ellie is selling tickets. She'll be there grabbing your arm and free refreshments in the back, all that good stuff. So I think we're in for a great evening. Our town historian, Bob Britton.
Thank you, and appreciate everybody coming here. Well over 100 people on this warm spring night. And very appropriate that this subject be covered tonight. Cinda Buchter is going to be talking, as you know, about some of her mother's interests, and most of her interests focus on Bethany and Bethany's well-being and preservation of Bethany's history. And she devoted a good part of her life to that, and she was an early supporter of the Historical Society. This is our 24th talk, in case anybody's counting. Ray Andresen, who's here tonight and who I'll not ask to stand up, and he's right over there, will be giving the next talk, number 25, on the history of the lands and organization of the Bethany Land Trust, and that should be very interesting and a lot of nice slides. But this is our second biographical talk that we've done. And if some of you would like to hear more of them, please talk to me and give me some suggestions. Bice Bunton, who not too fairly recently we lost, certainly was someone that deserved this. And it certainly is appropriate that her daughter give this talk on Mother's Day weekend. Without any further ado, I'd like to ask Cinda, who's hiding way back in the corner. While she's coming, I'll mention that she has served in many capacities herself. She probably won't tell you what they all are, but she's been Park and Rec Director, she's been tax collector, and if you can be a tax collector and still be liked, I think you're doing pretty well. And you're on.
Thank you. Okay, I hope I'm going to be able to do this without the microphone. Good. If you can't hear me, please tell me. During this, I am not pretending that any of this is really factual. This is about my mother, and a lot of the things, you can't hear me? And so,
is this better?
yes.
I know, it's because I'm so delicate. I grew up with my mother, but I have to admit that there were times I wasn't paying attention. Some of the things that I've learned when I was preparing for this talk, I've gotten from other people in town and from my dear aunt and from going through her things. And so this is a little bit of everything. and it doesn't cover nearly what her life was about. But it starts at the beginning, and it takes you through, and it includes the highlights. At least I hope. We need a few disclaimers. Number one, for those of you who are watching the video, please remember the camera adds at least 10 pounds. It's a really big camera. And at the end of this talk, Bob has decided that both my aunt and my brother get 5 minutes for rebuttal. If anybody has a story about my mother they'd like to share while we're doing this, please feel free to help me. We can start. You know, Bob asked me to do this in December, and I thought, what a nice thing. Lately, I'm not so sure I knew what I was doing when I said yes. I've been assured we are among friends, so please forgive me if I stumble through. Please don't drop the slides.
Oh, I got it.
You're in charge.
Oh.
They gave me too many things to hold. Is the light on? Pardon?
Try the other button.
This is a fairly recent picture of my mother. And most of the people in this room knew her, and most of you knew her longer than I did. But this is how I remember her. And we're going to start and end in the same place. My mother used to say she came from good Yankee stuff. And she did. This is my great-grandmother. This is Katie Downs Humiston.
She, what happened?
Katie Downs is
Direct. What happened? Not too close to
something. Am I working now?
Yes.
Okay. Katie Downs was the 6th generation of Downses in the town. Her ancestors came to Bethany in 1717. She married Dwight Humiston from Hamden, lived in Bethany, and raised her children.
Okay, we're back. All right, we'll get this.
Her children included Wallace Humiston. This was my mother's uncle, and he is really the beginning of the genealogies and the history that my mother followed through with. He is a minister. He was ordained in the Congregational Church in 1916. He also was a school teacher. My great-grandmother had 4 children. She had Lily, Ruby, Wallace, and Lita. This is my grandmother, Lita Humiston. Now, I chose her graduation picture because I think the women in our family had a different attitude in their day. My grandmother was asked, maybe I'm holding it wrong. My grandmother was asked for her hand in marriage by William Bice from Oxford, and she said no, for the condition that he was going into the war. He was going into World War I, and she wanted to teach school. And you couldn't teach school if you were a married lady. So she told him if he came back from the war that they would get married. In the meantime, she was going to teach. And she did. She taught. She taught at Gate School. This is William Bice. This is my grandfather. He did come back from the war, and he married Lita Humiston. Now, they lived in Oxford when they first got married. They had Gladys and Mary. and they moved back to Bethany shortly after they had Uncle Ray, I believe. And my grandmother told me the story that my grandfather had said, "I wouldn't take $1 million for the two I have, but I wouldn't give a nickel for another one." And then they had my mother. My mother was born on Christmas Eve in 1942. My grandmother, not that the women in our family are thick, but the doctor had said to my grandmother she was going to the hospital to have this child. My grandmother just didn't call him. She waited till it was too late. She wasn't about to go to a hospital when she had children and it was Christmas and she didn't need any hospital. They called him. He came to the house. This is the homestead that my mother grew up in. This is the homestead my grandmother grew up. My great-grandmother, Katie and Dwight Humiston, bought this house, and she raised her family. My grandmother raised her family. My grandmother has the distinction of being born in this house, and she died in this house. And this is the house that my mother was born in. This, for anyone who doesn't know, is on Litchfield Turnpike, and that's pretty much the way it looks today. They had a barn. This is the barn that I understand is going to be torn down shortly. But they raised white-faced Herefords, and they had horses, and they used it as a farm. When we talk about my great-grandmother, most people recognize her as being the one who started the Dewdrop Inn. She had become widowed, and she needed to support herself, and so she had her son-in-law, W.J. McGinn, build her the Dewdrop Inn, and she had a sister, Lily, that was maiden, had never married, that lived with her, and together they stayed at the Dewdrop Inn, lived there, baked, sold pies. We have, this is an original menu. Prices have changed. But she was a very enterprising woman, and she stayed at the Dewdrop Inn. Travelers that went from New Haven to Waterbury would stop, and she was right across from the airport, so she made a living. In the meantime, her daughter Lita was raising her family in the homestead on Litchfield Turnpike. The Dewdrop Inn became Billy's Ice Cream, and then it got torn down, except for the chimney, and now it's the Country Diner. But this is when it was Billy's Ice Cream. The people in this house, this is the Weed House. This house is located directly across from Perkins Road. People in the picture are Willard Reed, Alabama, their sister, and the gentleman on the right is Nelson Weed, known as Colonel. I asked my aunt if he served in the war, and she said no, he was just very bossy. That's why he was called Colonel. Maybe that's why he never got married. Colonel lived in the little house. He ate dinners that my great-grandmother prepared. And this is something I just found out. When he got very sick, he was older, he got very sick, my great-grandmother took care of him, fed him, and he eventually died staying with my great-grandmother. He deeded her the house. He left her this property, which she deeded over to my grandmother. And my grandparents sold the property first to John and Norma Smith Bauer, and then to Ellie and Bev Downs. Ellie Downs is a cousin of my grandmother's. This starts the schools. This is the Smith School. And this is the graduation. This is 1906. And Uncle Wallace as we call him. Wallace Hunston was the teacher. Pupils, Harold Beecher, Marjorie Beecher, Wilhelm Canfield, Flora Davidson, Josephine Doolittle, Alta Downs, Jerome A. Downs, Josephine E. Downs, Harriet Johnson, Mildred Saxton, and Wallace Saxton. Now the school board was the Reverend Lewis Morris, Samuel Davidson, and Jerome A. Downs. We're assuming senior. This is the cover of that graduation piece, and that is Uncle Wallace in the corner, and he looks to be about 12. They could start teaching. They started teaching right after they finished secondary school. So my grandmother was 18 when she started to teach. I'm assuming that Uncle Wallace wasn't much older. This is the Smith School, but we don't know who the children are. Does anybody in this room recognize this picture? You know any of them? Well, I could have made it up, couldn't I? This is the Gate School. This is the school that my grandmother taught in. And after she had stopped teaching and was raising her family, this is the school that her children went to. I remember my mother saying in second grade there were only 2 second graders, her and Bruce Blanchard. They used to sit together in the little 2-person desk, and when the Orange National Bank opened, his daughter was a teller, and she used to ask her, Cindy Blanchard was her name, and used to ask her how her dad was. In 1942, my mother graduated from Seymour High School. She was 17 years old. She immediately started to work, and she worked at the rubber company in Naugatuck. It's about this time, when she was 16 actually, that she got her horse. Now my mother's horse's name was Knight. He was a beautiful black horse, and he was rather rebellious? Spirited, that's a good word. He didn't like bridges. He danced or he jumped bridges. He also didn't like anything that made a hollow sound. This is another picture of Knight with my mom. It's about this time that we realize that she's got a lot more talent than I haven't seen anything she'd done when she was very young. This was this is probably the first scrapbook that we have of hers, and she did a rodeo scrapbook. And it's up in the front, and if you get a chance to take a look at it, it's pretty amazing when you think of all the things that she kept, and there's captions. Now, I always knew my mother was good at this. You look at my brother's baby book. It has a picture of him in a high chair with a chocolate spoon. And it says, Sunday, June 15th, 2:10 p.m., Rev, with cake spoon. My son's baby book has 3 pages filled out, and the rest are just pictures that are slid in. This is not something I inherited. Now, in the scrapbook, there's a lot of her drawings. They had gone to the New Haven Arena. It was May 14th, it's 1944, and Knight won't load. He won't get into the truck, and she had to ride him home. Can I turn this light off? Now, at this time, this is when the war is going on. Everybody that had horses is still a small community, but obviously the Crizzes were the blacksmiths. And everybody knew the Crizzes. So they go off to war. My mother puts in her scrapbook, world famous cowboys no longer scare citizens off sidewalks as they have now joined Uncle Sam's army. War will end soon now that Chris boys have gone to fight for country. There's another slide of this. These are envelopes that she saved. John Chris sent this to her. You can see up in the top it says October 23rd, 1944, in Kansas. It says, "This is the cavalry," and he's put "knight" on the butt of the horse. Now, we just found out John didn't draw this. His sister drove these, must have given them to him, and then he used the envelopes. This one says, oh yes, Knight. Yep, spunky. Everyone seems to know Knight's attributes. Now, he's not here for me to pick on. This is little Herbie Howard on his pony Colonel. They spent many enjoyable rodeos over at Willow Crest Farm, and there was always the introduction of little Herbie Howard. Now, this gentleman on this horse is no one we know. But Bob said you can see on the truck that it says, what does it say, Bob?
Willow Crest Ranch.
Willow Crest Ranch on the truck. My mother went to work right out of high school. When she was 21, she bought a car. A Pontiac from Harris Rake, where she bought all her cars. And she loved her car, and she made payments on it. And when she had gotten married, she was still working at the rubber company. She was still making payments, and she got pregnant with my brother. And in those days, you could not work when you were showing. So she was desperately trying to put pins in her skirt and make it in the work world. And she didn't quite make it, and she had to sell her rifle to make her last car payment. She married Ed Bunton, also from Hamden. By the way, my husband's from Hamden. Hamden is 3-0. She always called my father Prince Charming. She discovers that she loves to take pictures. This is a pond lily at the hotel pond, and I think she was up to her knees in water when she took this. I like the picture of the daffodils because think about the sky in the back, and where was she when she was taking this picture? Lady slippers. I remember as a kid my mother making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and telling us that we were going to look for lady slippers. The one thing that strikes me, now we have thousands of pictures and slides. My mother saw beauty, and she saw it in something so simple. These are leaves. We have loads of snow pictures. We have hundreds of pictures of my brother's cows. This picture I took because she took this maybe 6-7 years ago. It was just a woodpecker at the theater. She took this barn was on Hatfield Hill Road. It is no longer there. This picture, too, was taken within the last 10 years. She was always with a camera, always taking pictures. pictures is we don't have a lot of pictures of her, because she was taking the pictures. This is back when the Memorial Day parade had more people in the parade than were on the side of the road. This is her 4-H group. My dad is on the tractor. Some of the people sitting is Ellen Surprise and Gail Wilson, and that's Elsa Duzman behind them. I still haven't figured out who the blonde in the Army uniform is, but that's me, and I think that's my brother John's Air Force uniform. This was the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and that's a Russell boy. And or a Woodward. I think it's Russell. I know that for a fact, because I know it's a Woodward, because I had other slides, and I had Linda holding his hand, trying to keep him from running away or something. Now, she was pretty active in the 4-H, and we had a fife and drum. And here we are, we've all made our kilts, and we're marching. And if you look really carefully, you want me to try to find this? Right there is another park and rec director we've had. That's Marcia. This is the cellar hole on Perkins Road. When I was a kid, we used to walk up here and look for treasures. Now, you know that there was no treasures up there. But we used to go and turn things over and look for pieces of glass or something that was left of the people who lived here. And my mother used to talk about who lived in that house and what kind of life they led. And this is long before she did the book or had any inkling that she was going to do anything like this. She goes up in the airplane with Ellie down. She only got sick once. But she used to love to go in the airplane and take pictures. This is the homestead. This is my grandmother's house. And there aren't a lot of things around it. This is 1948. On the same day that she's up in the plane, she takes a picture of the town center with the churches and the town hall, and notice the outhouses. But look how different the land is. Oh, the groaning begins. In October, actually it was October 12th of 1963, the Congregational Church did a bicentennial celebration. They asked my mother if she would put together an exhibit of old houses that were in Bethany when Bethany was incorporated and the church started. This started my mother on her campaign to take pictures of old houses and find records. We took the opportunity to dress up and had a service. And this is our family. This is my grandfather with the raccoon tail. My grandmother, looking very dignified. My mother, yep, that's me, a little white dress. That's my aunt in the very nice hat. And Alice Ray and Eve, her daughters. Notice conspicuously the rest of the men on this image. That's right, that's what that has a ball, that one end of the stick has a raccoon tail, the other end has a ball, a wooden ball. If the ladies fell asleep in the service, he tickled you with the tail. And if a man fell asleep, he bopped you with the wooden ball. And he had a wonderful time that day. I love this picture of Mom and Allie. When my mother started getting information on the houses, she did it in multiple ways. She used Uncle Wallace's genealogies and his information. She started going through town records. She went to the cemeteries, and she started talking to the older citizens. Allie was a wealth of information. and not just about old times. She and my mother became good friends, and she taught my mother many things. She sold her chairs out of her chicken coop for $2 and then taught her how to cane them. She shared her photographs. She shared her stories. My mother and I always used to go with her when I was little, always enjoyed going to Allie's. I would have a lamb to feed out of a bottle, and Mom would be off with Allie looking at treasures from her house. This is Allie's house in better days.
Yeah.
This is where the book begins. The book grows. My mother has such a good time. She's taking pictures, she's getting all this information. She becomes a card-carrying member of the Genealogist Society. That means that she can go in and look at records for genealogy reasons. She starts hanging out at the town hall. She's in the vault. When the 1960s, Sid Seversky is the town clerk. Weenie Downs is the assistant town clerk. They finally offer her a job. They figure she's hanging around, she might as well answer the phone. All the time she's there, she's putting together information. When I tell you that we had a truckload of information, typed pages, thousands and thousands of pages that she typed. So now, this starts with the book. She starts taking photographs, how the houses are then, matching them to pictures of how the houses were years ago. She wants to know who lived there. This house, this is the Davidson house. Peter and Ellen Horvick live in it now, but it won't be their house until they die. Every house has an original owner and a famous owner. This is where the telephone exchange started. This has a singing room. There's a small room upstairs that has low, curved ceilings so that they could have singing lessons. I'll have to ask for it. And that's how it looked. Not recent photographs like this decade, but they're probably in the 70s. Oh, this is the Hoagland house, and this is Amity Road. This is the Hoagland house today. And this is the hallway in the Hoagland house about 100 years ago. This photograph was taken by Allie Wooden's uncle and shared with my mother for the book. Can we tell the flash in the pan story? I didn't know this. I've learned a tremendous amount during this time. George Levi Wooding was taking the picture, and they lighted, what was it called? What did they light?
Flash powder.
Flash powder. Which is why, use your little bullet spot down on the door. That's the reflection of the flash when it took the picture. This is the Davidson Red House, down on the corner of Litchfield Turnpike and Carrington Road. Now, the Davidsons don't live there anymore, nor is it red. But it will always be the Davidson Red House, at least to me, because that's how my mother always referred to it. And she took this picture when it was red, just to prove it used to be. This is, which one is this? This is the one on that road that the Mangers now live in. Clarence Newton. That's right. I wrote this all up. I knew I wouldn't remember. This was built in 1812 with the original L-shaped dwellings built in the 1700s. This is where Yvonne Johnson lives. This is the Jesse Atwater house, and it was built somewhere between 1750 and 1760. And it was used as a fresh air home for children from the city. I thought that was nice. Now I know this is the Dwyer house. Higgins Biddle live in it now, Mr. and Mrs. Higgins Biddle, and it's the William Wooding house. It was built around 1740, at least that's what it said, and it's one of the oldest houses. That's on Holy Road.
On the corner of Holy.
Now, I used to go with my mother when she photographed houses, and it never ceased to amaze me. She would always knock on the door, and most people knew her. But there were people who lived in the house that didn't know what she was doing, so she always explained to them what she was doing. She was making a scrapbook. People were wonderful. They invited her in. She told them about their house. I can remember going with her, and we would be gone for hours. And we would be taking pictures. She'd be taking pictures of fireplaces, and it was a nice feeling. Everybody was very receptive, and she always appreciated the fact that people were willing to open their homes to her. This is the Howard Estate on Holy Road. This is the Woodward homestead. Now, I think this is a real interesting picture because this is when the little house was in the back before it got moved. And that's the house that Linda lives in, correct? That's moved down the road?
Down there, around 25, 26.
1925 or 26, so this is a pretty old photograph.
Cherry Tree Farm.
The Abram Carrington house, I couldn't remember which Carrington started, built early in the 19th century. And this said that Mrs. Carrington made wonderful dinners at the house. I'm sure that's still true today. This house is on Munson Road. Brock and Maria Durley now live in it. At the time, it was owned by Harold and Martha Beecher. And it's the Grant Hitchcock house. And he owned it in 1932, which meant it was built before then. Part of the problem is the records weren't complete. So my mother used tax records, she used other references, the sketches of the Haven, and she made like puzzles and put things together. This is the child's house. It was the Congregational Parsonage. I remember going into this house when I was little. It was built in 1855, and it had a brick smokehouse in the attic for smoking hams and turkeys, not other things. This is a beautiful house inside. This house is on Route 42, and it is the Newell Lounsbury house, and it was built in 1750. Now, Route 42 has changed. This is Beacon Road. And I included this house because my mother used to babysit there when she was young. This is a picture of the house. Not today. Today you can't see it from the road. There's so much wrong, and they have fences up. But this is, Route 42 is pretty close to this house. Now we included these because we felt that part of her book is preserving history of Bethany in some of the buildings that are no longer here. This is the Methodist Church. It was taken down in 1955. The cemetery still stands, of course. This is the Hinman House. Now we all know a lot went on in this house. Mr. Hinman was the town clerk. He ran a printing press. He was a judge of probate. And this is the most recent house that we've lost. It was the Porter house when because I used to be in this house with the Porters. This is the Miles Hitchcock house. It was built in 1818 and it burned in the year 2000. So after many years of doing pictures and thousands of typed pages, the library decides to publish the book. And my mother is extremely pleased. It was very painstaking. There was a lot of editing. And in November of 1972, the book was published, and she's at the book signing at the library. I want to read the last paragraph of her acknowledgement. It says, "I wish to express my sincere gratitude to the many people who have contributed their knowledge and time to this book. Special mention must be made of Mr. George Vail for the painstaking task of editing my scrapbook, and of Mrs. Elizabeth Mendel for assisting him, of Mr. Alvin Eisenman for designing the book, and of the Bethany Library Association who thought this collection worthy of publication. I am also indebted to the elder citizens who shared their memories and photos, and of my good friend, Mrs. Marion Woodward Sandell, whose love of Bethany is as great as my own." When she was writing the book, she started spending a lot of time in the cemetery. This is the old cemetery, and this is a style. Is that right? A style, I have learned, is a staircase so you don't have to go through the gate. And the cows aren't smart enough to go up the stairs. This is Bob Brinton in the old cemetery. This was a few years ago. One of the things that I personally, and I'm sure a lot of people are grateful for, is Craig had young Peter Corbett do a lot of work in the cemetery and straighten the stones, and it helps to preserve them. And this is our oldest cemetery, and I'm a believer that it needs to be preserved. It's at this time that she and Jerry Hungerford become very close friends. They share a love for cemeteries and for the carvings and for the town. And they spend a lot of time in the cemetery. My mother found her riches in many things besides material things. She had a closeness to her town and to its history. And in one of the articles, I think it's this article, that she says that they feel like old friends. And she's talking about the stones, the people that are buried there. She never knew these people, but somehow she felt a closeness to them. And she saw a reason to preserve it. This is, I believe, Jerry doing the rubbing. Wonderful time. She became a member of the Association for Gravestone Studies. They used to go to conferences. She needed a bumper sticker that says, "I break for old cemeteries." We used to go with my mother. She used to recruit us. Who'd like to go for a ride? We did go to a family wedding in Vermont. It could have been the longest ride home. We only stopped, I think, at 2 cemeteries. This is the Episcopal Cemetery. This is a stone in the Spirit Cemetery. Bob's shaking his head, yes. Good. And this has a veteran flag. One of the things that she did, Uncle Wallace had started the information on the cemeteries, and she started filling in the blanks. And working in the town hall, she also started to try to map out, make some kind of documentation as to where people were and where all the veterans were. And many groups have done the flags, but we as 4-H'ers did the flags for many years, and Mother knew where all the veterans were, so we could put flags on their stone. Now this is a picture of my mother rubbing, and she happens to be in Newtown. She went all over. We used to go to the Grove Cemetery down in New Haven a lot. Used to go to the crypt under the Congregational Church in New Haven. She was able to identify on a lot of stones who carved them. Just a picture of her rubbing. When Bob suggested I bring some of the rubbings, I told him we could paper the walls. We have rolls and rolls of rubbing. This is an old brownstone, and you can't see it, it's kind of dark. But this is a death head, but it's an angel. It's an angel's head. This is a slate stone, and this is a true death head. And this is the weeping willow with the urn. It really is fascinating when you start to learn what all of the symbols mean, and there's such great stories in the cemetery. Now, we used to go to cemeteries with her all the time. It never seemed kind of out of the ordinary for us, but other people thought it was rather strange. This is the Congregational Cemetery. This is where she is buried, as well as my dad. And when I was the superintendent of Sunday school, on a spring Sunday morning, my mother and I took all the Sunday school kids over to the cemetery, and we talked about how years ago it used to be important to be, if you were a deacon, it was on your stone, that was a very honorable thing, and she let the kids do a rubbing. And Andy Ives was about 6th grade then, and he saw my father's stone, and my mother's name was on it with her birthday. And he said, "Oh, how do you sleep at night with your name on a stone in the cemetery? That's gross." He wasn't as comfortable in cemeteries as we were. Now all the time she's doing scrapbooks, she's taking pictures, she's working, she's painting. We already know she's artistic, but she finds her love of painting, and it's all the old ways. I don't remember her ever doing anything in sketching or watercolors. What she loved were the old types of arts, the theorem painting on velvet, no Elvis in sight. She used to dye her velvet with tea to make it look old. She did toll painting. She painted chairs. She painted just about anything that didn't move. And she took painting classes, all kinds of painting classes. This is a picture of my sister-in-law, who went with her to one of the last painting classes she attended. Of course, my mother's not in the picture because she's taking it. But I want you to notice something. You got all the students, they're lined up, they got their stuff. You tell where my mother's sitting? Right there. She's got her little, this is a painted orange juice can, but she has her brushes in. Now, we were trying to figure out when this was taken. We know it's before 1977. Does anybody remember when this was? Some of you were in it. This is a reunion of the one-room school. Okay? The lady. This is my grandmother. This is Lita Bice. This is Miss Nettleton. This is Mom. This is Ellie. Where's Annie Gladys? I know she's over here. Oh, no, this is Helen Riley. Looking at her brother Harlan. That's Aunt Marion. Okay. Excuse me while Let's see. This is Uncle Ted, my Aunt Gladys's husband. Auntie Gladys, where are you?
I'm right below Ted.
Oh, right there. I see you. This is my Uncle Red. So he was up here at that time. And we are not sure what this occasion was, but everybody got together for a picture of the one-room schoolhouse people. In 1975, they honored my mother by asking her to be the Grand Marshal of the Memorial Day Parade. Now, I have some great pictures that I wasn't able to put my hands on because at that point, 1975, Reb was out of the service and she decided she wanted a color guard. So Reb put on his Army uniform, Skip LeMontagne put on his Marine uniform, and Tommy Hicks got out his Air Force uniform, and Billy Slater got out his Air Force uniform, and they marched with my mother. This is a picture of her and Gordon laying the wreath at the old town hall. This is the schoolhouse. She was on the committee. She felt very strongly about preserving the schoolhouse. And these are the newspaper of the moving of the schoolhouse. And one thing we liked about it is the bottom picture, because the schoolhouse was used as the original firehouse. And this is it being brought up to the center of town, and it's going past the present-day firehouse. Yep, that's Dwighty on top. And the one-room schoolhouse as it sits today. This is something I learned. When this plaque was made up, I knew this plaque was here. I even knew what it said. What I didn't know is my mother wrote the text for it. This is the backside. This was in 1981. My mother was the co-chair of both the bicentennial and the sesquicentennial committees. She liked being on committees that worked with history. It was fun for her to be with people who had interest in history, and so many of her friends shared her passion. Along comes the conception for the Bethany Historical Society. And this is when they obtained the Stanley Downs Memorial Building to be the Historical Society. Yep, and this is my mom. I'm going from left to right. It's Mom and Isabel Anderson. It's Wilburn. That's Bob Brinton Jr., Ed Sapega, Timer Down, Hiram Carrington, Bob Brinton Sr., and Edith Carrington. I have to tell you that my mother really enjoyed working with the Brintons. The fact that Will and young Bob had such an interest in history gave her a sense of continuance, that even though elder members of the community would at some point not have the time and the energy, that the younger members would carry on. And she always referred to the three Brintons as the Brinton Boys, as if they were some rogue group of historical outlaws roaming through the town of Bethany. In 1975, they honored her with an achievement plaque. She is thrilled to death to receive it. This is Timer presenting her with it. A picture of the plaque. This is when Will Brinton becomes a director, I believe. He takes my mother's place from the original 8. I have this up front. The library. She was on the board of directors for the library. She was a thunk. My grandparents were on the original board of directors for the library. They did a house tour as a fundraiser. Yes. Jerry Hungerford and Nancy Casella, Mimi Niederman, Jackie Podolov, Mary Quinn, Alice Bunton, and Sue Hoskins. This is the old town hall. This isn't the Historical Society yet. This is still the old town hall. And this is where she comes to work. The town hall was built by W.J. McGinn, who was my mother's uncle. He was married to her Aunt Lily. He built the Dewdrop Inn, and he built the town hall. This is a picture of my mother in the old town hall when things were a little crowded. They moved to the new spacious town hall. Now I can contribute to this. When they moved here, they thought this building was so large they were never going to use all the space. I remember the discussion. So only one side of the hall had air conditioning. I know that because my office was on the other side. This is when they moved in. Sid Seversky is retiring as the town clerk. This is Marge Rooney, that's the tax collector, and my mother was the town clerk-elect, and this is in 1977. Now, my mother served as town clerk until 1979. The reason she served one term is because my dad died. He died in 1978. She was 52 years old, and she felt kind of lost. And she didn't want to commit to another term. And so that's when Joan Simpson became our town clerk. And my mother went to retirement. I remember her sitting out by the pool, not sure what she was going to do. And so she was trying to put together a resume. At that point, Gordon Carrington came and asked her to come back. Now, she had a special relationship with Gordon. He was more than a coworker. He was a friend. He was someone who she depended on to give her advice. She trusted him. He convinced her to come back and be his secretary. She could do financials, the town was growing, and the jobs needed to be split apart. My mother, always the bookkeeper, liked to pay attention to detail, was easily brought back. She served first as bookkeeper, secretary to the selectmen. She eventually ran for treasurer. Now I have to tell you, when I was young, my mother used to come home. She used to clerk for the planning and zoning. She clerked for the board of finance. She seemed to always go to meetings. And she would come home, she would sit, and she would diligently write out those minutes. She had to get them written in longhand because she took shorthand. She wanted it while it was fresh in her mind. I was very young and impressionable, and I used to sit there and think, boy, she must be important. I hope I get to do that someday. And you can file that under careful what you wish for. My mother spent 24 years working for the town, and she loved her job. All of them. She loved the fact that things were in order. She liked the fact that she was a small contributing part to this community. They gave her a lovely retirement party in 1990. This is a picture of her and Joan. She was a little embarrassed. She had retired once before already, and they had given her, I think, the earrings came first. Lovely pair of earrings. She retired in 1990, and they gave her the necklace to match. They told her if she came back, she'd get the bracelet. This is a great picture of my mother and John Ford. I think John did a proclamation, was giving it to my mother. She worked with Gordon for many years, and when Gordon passed away, she felt a terrible loss, not only as a boss, but as a friend. She found in John, I would say she was more mothering. Not that any of us need extra mothers, but she liked the fact that he talked to her about things and asked her opinion. She never wanted to overstep her bounds, but she found an easy and comfortable working relationship with John. And he made the transition much easier for her with the loss of Gordon.
Very small.
The other side says Scotland. My mother had many fortunes in her life. She enjoyed traveling, and she and Edith took a trip to England and Scotland. I think there was probably cemeteries involved. She loved to travel, but she loved to come home more. She wasn't good at long distance for long times. She liked her home. She liked being near her family. She used to go every winter down to stay with Marion. I'm not sure where the Garfield comes in. This picture was taken in church. And she looked particularly happy. It was Christmas time. It's just one of my favorites. My mother was fortunate enough to spend 28 years with her Prince Charming. This is a picture of my mother and her children. She's the one who taught me that stepchildren in your life are the bonus plan. This is Rev and I, and my brother John, and my brother Ned. Of all the things my mother loved most, I think it was her family that always came first. She had the good fortune of having a wonderful sister that was so close to her in all aspects of her life. And she had cousins. And I love this picture because this is 3 sets of sisters. You've got Vivian Cable. There we go. This is Vivian Cable, and this is her sister Dot. This is Luann, used to be down Pascota, and her sister, Isabel Anderson. This is my mom and her sister, Gladys. The cousins used to get together for lunch. My mother's sense of family. This is my grandmother, my mother, myself, and this is Jared. My generation is known for saying that they want to do more for their children than their parents did. I went into motherhood hoping I would do as well for my child as my mother did. She had many things precious in her life. This is Jared when he's 16. And the fact that she would get hugs from her grandchildren, that they grew up with her, they spent many Saturdays in her pool. Nobody made a plate of peanut butter and jelly crackers like Grandma. She was fortunate enough to have a son-in-law and a daughter-in-law who loved her like their own mother, and she was always appreciative. One of the best things she did was they gave land to her son, and my brother lived next to my mother for 25 years, and he was a constant source of comfort and knowing that her family was that close all the years. I have a magnet that says it's love that makes you rich and not money. And this is my mother, Alice Bice Bunton, and she was the wealthiest person I know.
A wonderful tribute on a Holiday Day weekend. Superb job. I don't know about the rest of it, but it was a real tribute. Before we break up, quick mention of some of the displays. There are a couple of Allison books that are available out here for anybody that would want to purchase one. Of special interest is this particular map that was produced for distribution in folded form with the book. We have run across some from the library. These haven't been available for 30 years. They're a kind of a reproduction map of an 1868 Beers Atlas map that was updated for this book. If you're interested, they're only $5. After having committed